For checks and adjustments balancing shafts, housing needs special tools. Remove the oil pan, unscrew the filter bolts, and remove the aluminum rod of the filter manifold until an installation hole appears in the inspection hole to install the flywheel installation tool. Use the flywheel installation tool to lock the engine flywheel. When the flywheel is fixed, the blind hole of the balancing shaft is directed in the direction of the crankshaft. Insert the fixed pin to reset the position of the balancing shaft into the blind hole and install the bolt to reset the position of the balancing shaft. If it is easy to install, then the balancing shaft is in the correct position. Otherwise, the balancing shaft is in the wrong position and must be disassembled and installed before readjusting. After making sure that the balancing shaft is installed correctly, remove the balancing shaft positioning tool, remove the flywheel positioning tool, check the axis of the balancing shaft, and tighten the dial indicator rod, and install the bracket for the percentage ratio. Please note that the head of the dial indicator is placed in the mounting hole of the balance shaft gap sensor, and the installation must ensure that the perception of the gap sensor is maintained at a certain level. The head of the dial indicator and the sensor are positioned perpendicular to each other. Update the dial of the arrow indicator, turn the gap measurement lever, read the gap value, and write it down. The clearance for normal operation ranges from 0.01 mm to 0.07 mm. If the standard value is not met, replace the appropriate parts. The check of the gap between the balancing shafts is completed. Put away the instrument for measuring the axis of the scale. Then, measure the drive shaft clearance. First, install the gap measuring rod on the drive shaft of the scale and tighten the screw. Install a tool to measure the axis of the scale. Squeeze the balancing shaft of the drive all the way from the oil pump side. Turn the indicator arrow to 0 and manually turn the gap measurement lever to measure the gap and record it. Loosen the screws of the gap measuring rod and turn the crankshaft in the normal direction of rotation of the engine by turning it 45 degrees. Move the gap measurement lever, wrap the dial of the arrow indicator, measure the gap value, and write it down. The axial clearance for normal operation ranges from 0.01 mm to 0.07 mm. Continue to rotate the crankshaft in the same direction and at the same angle. Use the rod to measure the gap and perform 7 more clearance measurement operations. Please note, if the clearance does not meet the standard, the balancing shaft adjustment pad must be replaced to adjust. The measurement of the drive balancing shaft is completed. Put the tool away. Remove the body of the balancing shaft and the adjusting gasket. Turn the crankshaft and use the flywheel installation tool to fix the engine flywheel. Before installing the balancing shaft assembly, the blind hole of the balancing shaft is placed in the direction of the crankshaft by rotating the gear, and the fixed pin of the balancing shaft is installed in the direction of the crankshaft. The mounting pin of the balancing shaft is inserted into the blind hole. Fix the position of the balancing shaft. Install 2 gaskets on the engine. Install the body of the balancing shaft and 8 bolts. Please pay attention to the installation sequence of the bolts. Tighten in the middle first, then tighten diagonally. Tighten with a force of 5 to 10 nanometers, and then tighten at an angle of 60 plus or minus 5 degrees. Remove the balancing shaft mounting device, remove the flywheel mounting device, and install it again. Check, after installing the tool gasket, that a total of 9 operations are performed to measure the gap between the balance shaft and the crankshaft. The operation is completed. Remove the balancing shaft measuring tool and select the appropriate thickness adjustment gasket to replace the tool gasket according to the minimum gap measured 9 times. Please note that the minimum clearance value is equal to or greater than 0.01 mm and less than 0.03 mm. Replace the tool gasket with a 1.57 mm thick gasket. Install the flywheel positioning tool and the balancing shaft positioning tool again, according to the method described above. Replace the installation gasket of the tool, select the appropriate gasket to adjust the thickness, pay attention to the direction of the gasket and the position of the oil channel, and perform the gap measurement operation again. Apply a strip of sealant to the sealing surface of the oil pan to install the oil pan. The tightening torque of the oil pan bolt is 8 nanometers. Pay attention to the tightening sequence.